I woke up to the soft glow of early morning sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of my bedroom. At 35, I never imagined I would still feel the subtle tug of nostalgia every time I smelled coffee brewing or heard our old songs playing on the radio. I had been living on my own for almost 5 years since my marriage fell apart, and every decision felt like a tightrope walk between hoping for happiness and fearing disappointment. When my younger sister Emily knocked on my door that morning and peeked in, her familiar smile reminded me of simpler times. Before life's complications and heartbreaks, she stepped into the room carrying a mug of coffee, steam curling off the surface. I sat up in bed, hair tangled into a messy halo, wearing my ex's oversized flannel shirt that I had scavenged from the back of my closet. It still smelled faintly like him, a blend of his cologne and the crisp autumn air from our last road trip. I hesitated before pulling the shirt tighter around me, self-conscious of how big it looked on my smaller frame. "Morning," I said, attempting casual, but my voice betrayed the vulnerability I tried to hide. Emily set the mug on my nightstand and perched on the edge of the bed. Her eyes flickered over me, taking in the shirt, the tousled hair, the weariness etched into my expression. She gave a gentle smile that carried more warmth than a midsummer sunrise. "You look beautiful," she said softly, her voice steady, yet brimming with sincerity. Those words felt like a healing balm, soothing the insecurity that clung to me like a second skin. I couldn't help but smile back, though my heart raced at the unexpected compliment. My cheeks warmed, and I realized how much I needed that affirmation. After years of putting others first, my career, my ex-husband's ambitions, even Emily's relentless pursuit of her dreams, I had lost sight of when I last thought I looked beautiful for no reason other than I was me. I wanted to tell her how much her words meant, but before I could find the words, she tilted her head and raised an eyebrow. "So do you in his shirt." She crossed her arms, a playful smirk dancing on her lips. It was the same smirk she used when she wanted me to lighten up, or when she knew I was overthinking something. I swallowed, feeling the tension leave my shoulders as laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. It wasn't mocking or mean. It was an invitation to share a moment, to shed the weight of my self-doubt, and to embrace the ridiculous and beautiful irony of the situation. My sister, the eternal optimist, helping me see myself through her unwavering love and teasing. Emily leaned back slightly against the headboard, coffee mug in hand, and her gaze softened. She had flown in from Seattle last night, her work schedule a whirlwind of conference calls and presentations. Yet she'd taken time off just to be here with me this weekend, my impromptu staycation suggestion that turned into a mini family reunion. The city outside was humming with its usual Saturday bustle, but in that moment, the only sound that mattered was our shared laughter and the comforting hiss of the coffee maker. It felt like a small oasis of normalcy in my otherwise chaotic world. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring its warmth as it spread through me. The night before, I had confessed to Emily that I felt stuck, so caught up in nostalgia and regret, that I sometimes struggled to recognize the person I was becoming. She listened without judgment as I talked about my lonely apartment, my stagnant writing career, and the gnawing fear that perhaps I had made too many mistakes to ever find real fulfillment again. In response, she had surprised me with this visit. Determined to remind me of who I was beyond those fears, she leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and said, "Remember how you used to write stories about small towns, lost loves, hidden treasures? You had this gift, Harlow, of weaving magic out of the mundane." She used my childhood nickname, a token of affection that sent a flutter through my chest. "You're still that person. You just lost sight of it. Why not spend today exploring the city with fresh eyes? Take pictures, jot down ideas. I'll be your biggest fan." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Her faith in me was a tether, pulling me out of the dark spiral of self-doubt. I exhaled, feeling the weight on my chest lift for the first time in months. The shirt suddenly felt less like a relic of the past and more like a symbol of my resilience, a reminder that I could borrow strength from memories without being trapped by them. I thanked Emily, my voice steady now, and promised to try. We sat in companionable silence for a few more minutes, watching the steam dance above our mugs. Then we made a plan: brunch at the Little Cafe on Maple Street, a stroll through the park, and an afternoon at the art museum. Just a sister's day out, simple and unhurried, but it felt like the first real step toward finding my way again. Really excited. I brushed a strand of hair behind my ear as Emily nudged my arm in the back seat of her rented car. We were heading toward Maple Street Cafe, a cozy spot with exposed brick walls and mismatched chairs that smelled of cinnamon and fresh-baked muffins. The sun peeked through the morning haze and painted golden streaks on the dashboard. I felt a flutter in my chest I had not experienced in years. It was a mix of anticipation and nerves, as though I was about to step onto a stage after months in the wings. Emily caught my gaze and winked encouragingly. In that simple gesture, I found permission to breathe more deeply and let go of some of the tension I had carried since sunrise. When we arrived at the cafe, the line snaked out the door but moved quickly under the efficient management of the young barista. We ordered 2 lattes and blueberry pancakes with a side of strawberry compote. The waiter led us to a worn wooden booth near the window where sunlight streamed across the tabletop. I traced the grain of the wood with my fingertips as Emily began to talk about her latest project at work. Even in her excitement, she listened closely when I spoke, her brown eyes reflecting genuine curiosity. I told her about my half-forgotten novel outline, the one I had abandoned after my divorce. My voice wavered at first but gained strength as I described the small town and the solitary librarian who rescued a lost traveler during a snowstorm. Emily nodded and asked about the character's backstory. Her questions felt like scaffolding, helping me rebuild the confidence I had misplaced years ago. After breakfast, we walked along Maple Street toward the park, lined with towering oaks and wrought iron benches. The air carried a hint of early spring blossoms even though the calendar read mid-June. I slipped my hand through Emily's as we approached a fountain where pigeons pecked at scattered crumbs. We paused to watch the water cascade in gentle arcs. I closed my eyes and listened to the soft murmur of people chatting nearby. The sound reminded me that I was not alone in my struggles. Life continued around me with its vivid tapestry of ordinary moments that still held magic if I paid attention. I opened my eyes and smiled at Emily, feeling a surge of gratitude for her presence, for her insistence that I deserved this day of simple pleasures. Emily suggested we wander into the art museum on the other side of the park. Admission was free on the first Saturday of every month, and neither of us had visited that wing before. Inside the museum's hushed corridors, the air felt cool and the chatter softened to respectful whispers. Paintings and sculptures lined the walls, each piece a testament to someone's vision and perseverance. I paused in front of a portrait of a woman standing alone on a rocky shore. Her gaze was fierce yet vulnerable, her posture suggesting resilience despite the gale that roiled the waves behind her. I imagined how she must have weathered her own storms. Standing beside me, Emily read the artist's note about how the painting symbolized personal transformation. I leaned closer as if seeking a secret whispered through the brushstrokes. We spent nearly an hour drifting from gallery to gallery. In one room, a collection of black and white photographs captured street scenes from decades past. In another, an abstract installation rose like a forest of steel beams. I felt an unexpected thrill watching how shapes and shadows played against one another. I jotted notes in my phone about texture and atmosphere as inspiration for my writing. The more I immersed myself in the museum's creative energy, the more I realized how much I had missed exploring new perspectives. Inspiration had a way of sneaking up when I allowed myself to look beyond my own worries. Emily noticed my note-taking and boasted that she would commission me to write a short story for her next business retreat. We laughed at the idea of keynote speeches illustrated by my prose. Exiting the museum into the bright light of afternoon, we paused outside beneath a canopy of budding trees. Emily suggested we find a spot in the park to sit and share our favorite quotes from the exhibits. I pulled out my phone and read aloud lines from a plaque beside a landscape painting. The horizon does not limit the journey but invites it. Hearing those words spoken felt like a direct message to my heart. I repeated the sentence quietly, letting it sink in. Emily closed her eyes and rubbed her thumb across her coffee-stained notebook cover. She whispered that sometimes small reminders were all we needed to move forward. In that moment, I realized how much strength I had regained just by giving myself permission to engage with the world again. Our final stop was a tiny bookstore around the corner from the park. Its bell tinkled when we opened the door, and the scent of aged paper wrapped around us like a familiar blanket. I ran my fingers along the spines of the novels, graphic memoirs, and travelogues. Emily drifted to a shelf of poetry collections, while I discovered a dog-eared paperback of short stories by authors I admired in college. I carried it to the counter alongside a vintage leather journal, the kind with unlined pages perfect for raw ideas. When the clerk rang up our purchases, I felt a surge of excitement that I had felt only on the verge of new beginnings. The simple act of buying a notebook felt like a pact between my present self and the writer I aspired to be again. By the time we returned to Emily's car, the sun had dipped lower in the sky and painted the clouds in shades of peach and lavender. I leaned back in the passenger seat, journal resting on my lap. I turned its first page and wrote, "Today is the day I start again." The words felt momentous, though nothing spectacular had occurred. It was the ordinary magic of a sister's encouragement, a morning spent exploring simple joys, and the quiet reminder that I belonged in my own story. Emily glanced over and nodded, her smile radiant in the fading light. I looked out the windshield at the city skyline emerging in silhouette and realized I was ready for whatever came next. This day had shown me that beauty existed not just in memories but in each breath I took, each step I dared to make forward. And with Emily by my side, I knew I would never have to navigate the path alone. I opened my leather journal that evening in my apartment's living room, the pages soft and inviting under my fingertips. The day's light had faded into twilight, and the city's hum filtered through the open window. I wrote the words I had been carrying all day. Today I claimed my story again. As I filled the page with memories from our outing, Maple Street's golden morning, the museum's hushed galleries, the bookstore's comforting hush, I felt a pulse of clarity. I realized that each moment of curiosity and wonder had reignited a spark I thought was lost. Scribbling down the librarian's voice, the woman on the rocky shore, and the quote about horizons, I mapped out how these images could weave into my novel's final chapters. The journal's blank pages felt less daunting now that I had concrete threads to follow. The next morning, I poured myself another latte and settled at my makeshift desk by the window, where the first light of dawn cast long shadows across my notes. I retyped my outline on the laptop, introducing the protagonist's transformation through small, human connections, mirroring my own journey. My fingers hesitated only once, when doubt crept in, whispering that I was fooling myself. But I pictured Emily's warm eyes and reminded myself of her unwavering belief. I typed past the hesitation, letting the narrative flow. Paragraph by paragraph, I fleshed out scenes of roadside friendship, the comfort of found family, and the quiet courage it takes to start over. By midday, I had drafted 20 pages, more than I had written in months. As afternoon turned to evening, I sent an email to the independent editor I had met at a local writers' meetup months ago, an editor who specialized in small-town dramas. With a racing heart, I attached my first 10 pages and a summary of the story's arc. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Within the hour, my phone buzzed. She was interested and asked if I would send the complete manuscript by the following week for a courtesy review. Relief and exhilaration washed over me in equal measure. I read the message to the empty room, my voice catching, and then I laughed out loud when I realized how radically my fears had shifted from worrying I'd never write again to racing against a deadline to fulfill a promise. The days that followed were a blur of research and rewrites. I revisited the park bench where Emily and I had shared quotes and sketched scenes into my journal. I wandered Maple Street again, sketching calf corners and antique shop windows into my mind. Every sight, sound, and scent became a potential metaphor or dialogue cue for my characters. Late nights were spent in coffee shops, where the baristas recognized me by name and kept refilling my cup as I typed furiously. I struggled through moments of self-doubt, questioning my motives, worrying the story was too kitsch, or that no reader would care, but each time I almost gave up. I imagined Emily's encouraging nudge and pushed forward. By the end of the week, I completed the draft at just over 60,000 words. I read the manuscript aloud in my apartment's silent spaces, listening for clumsy phrases or awkward pacing. When I finished, I leaned back and let a single tear fall, not from sadness, but from release and pride. I formatted the document, attached it to a new email, and sent it off to the editor before I could talk myself out of it. Then I sank onto the couch, closing my eyes, letting the magnitude of my actions settle. For the first time in years, I felt like a writer who had reclaimed her voice rather than someone merely going through the motions of survival. A week later, the editor's response arrived. She loved the emotional authenticity, the vivid settings, and the honest struggle of the protagonist. She suggested a few structural tweaks and offered to help me polish the manuscript for eventual publication. My heart leapt as I read her notes, each comment a beacon guiding me toward a stronger narrative. I scheduled a video call to discuss revisions. When the call ended, I called Emily, my voice trembling as I shared the news. She whooped so loudly her dog ran into her office, and I laughed, telling her I had almost wept reading her reaction. She insisted we celebrate that weekend with another Sister's Day out, this time at a writing retreat she had found in the nearby hills. Now, as the sun sets on my 6th day of revisions, I close my laptop and stretch, marveling at how much my world expanded over the past week. The setbacks and heartbreaks that once defined me feel less like chains and more like a proving ground where I discovered my resilience. I think about the woman on the rocky shore in that painting, standing firm against the storm, and I realize I've become her in my own way, gazing into uncertainty without flinching. Tomorrow, I will dive back into edits, armed with newfound confidence and supported by the unshakable bond of sisterhood. I tuck my journal into my bedside drawer and settle under the covers, the city's distant glow painting patterns on the ceiling. My mind drifts to the book's eventual launch, possibly next spring, and to the readers who might find solace in these pages. Before sleep takes me, I whisper a promise to myself. I will keep writing, keep exploring the ordinary miracles around me, and remember that beauty is not just a memory, it is every breath, every step forward, and every story I dare to tell. With that, I close my eyes, ready to dream of the chapters yet to come.